Welcome back. In this lesson, we will continue with building our calculator function block network. In order to do that, we will use standard libraries, and these standard libraries are from the libraries that you can see here. There are two libraries in this solution, runtime base and NxtStudio. Now, when you created the project, these two were added automatically. Of course, you can manage them and decide what libraries you want in your project. You can do that by right-clicking and on the name of the solution and saying library reference. So you can see that these are the library references that are already in the project. And you can, of course, add more. For example, if you want to use some communication function blocks, then you can add those. But for this lesson and for the rest of this section, we don't need any other additional libraries. What we have is good enough. Later in this tutorial, you will see how to add new libraries to your installation and then to your project. That's more advanced. We will come back to it in the later part of this tutorial series. Let's go back. Now, there are two ways of adding function blocks. We have already seen that in the introduction. So I will use the shortcut method. But before that, I just want to show where all the division and multiplication blocks are stored. They are stored in, you can right click and say FB, go to runtime base and then runtime standard. And here you can see your add, division, multiplication, and subtraction. So since we are already in this context menu, let's go ahead and add the add block. Okay. And there's an interesting thing about this standard library function block is that you can extend this function block to up to 16 inputs. And since add requires 2, there's a minimum of 2. So how do you do that? You see this small square on the right bottom. You just hover over it, click your regular click, that's the left click, and drag it. Okay, and you decide how many you want. But in our example, we just have 2 inputs, so we will use the default ones. Now, if you hover around above those 2 input variables, you will see that they are of type real, but we have our inputs of type in it. So how do we use them? Or how do we connect them? Of course, you can connect because they are primarily integral data types, but to avoid any problems during runtime, we want to have them of the same type. So how do we do that? Again, you hover around the bottom right corner, but instead of left clicking to drag, you do right click, do not drag, and then select interface editor. Now you can see that they are all of type real. We can change that to int. Now you see that the out also gets changed to int because it's a standard block. If you're adding 2 integers, the output can be integer as well. Of course, you can not overwrite that. Okay, so now we have integer types everywhere. Okay, let's go ahead and add the other blocks. We will use the shortcut method, Control W, and to subtract. Let's go here, then Control W again, multiplication, enter. Let's align that here, and let's go again through the other method just to remember where these are and select division. Okay, now you see an interesting additional output here. It just says that this error will be true. It's of type Boolean. If you notice, this will be true when you try to divide by 0. That is, if your divisor is 0, then it will throw this error. that's a good exception handling mechanism built into these function blocks. Okay. Before I make connections, let's stop here and we will continue the rest of this in the next lesson.